I'm Brynn Evans, and I'm really excited to be hosting this conversation today about what I consider to be one of the hardest things in design, hiring and building out a great design team. I think this is challenging for a number of reasons. For one, designers are hard to come by. There's a lot of us in the audience here today, but a lot of designers are happy in their jobs, and it's hard to convince them to consider a new opportunity. I think recruiters face this a lot. I think as design managers, we face this a lot. Once you've got designers recruited onto your teams, growing their skills and their talents and keeping them motivated and engaged is really challenging. Smart people are hard to keep engaged. And thirdly, I feel that as you grow your team or the needs of your organization change over time, you need to constantly be reevaluating your hiring practices, where your needs are, and so you're just constantly revisiting this timely question of hiring and building out great teams. So for me, this is particularly timely because I've recently switched teams at Google, as John mentioned. I was on a pretty large team on Google+ for a long time, and I was helping with hiring and sourcing and recruiting there. But what I found is, because I could staff for a really large team, I could find the best talent and find a good role for them on the broader team. And suddenly I've switched roles, and I'm on a much smaller team in Android. It really operates a lot more like a startup, and I manage 2 designers and 1 researcher. And suddenly, I want to hire a new designer, and I have to be really picky about filling that role because I only have 1 slot. And yet, I need this person to have really specific skills to help me in really specific ways suddenly. So I've noticed, again, needs shifting over the course of changing jobs and roles and things like that. So to get started, I'd like to have the panelists quickly introduce themselves, say something about their role and their background, especially as it pertains to hiring and your experiences in the past, and a point of view that you have on hiring or some perspective.
Cool. So, hey everyone, I'm Mia. I manage product designers at Pinterest. Before Pinterest, I was at Square, so similar growth trajectory, but very different product and relatively different culture. And before that, I was at IDEO for a while, which is a completely different hiring spectrum. So from a design manager or leadership perspective, one of the things that I try and think about is designing the team. If you look at a description for any design leadership role, you'll see things like scale the team, deliver great work, engage your designers, all business talk. But at the end of the day, we're designers. We know how to create complex systems, interactions, communication flows, and environments that are really successful and creative. So that's definitely a motto that I bring to the table in terms of how do we cultivate a great culture, how do we think about the composition of our team, and how do we all work together. One of the things that I've learned along the way, just like being a designer, being a design manager or leader, you have to take some risks. And you're going to fail, and that's OK, just like the things that you're building every single day. But you got to try something new. And what works for me may not work for these guys, and so on. So taking risk and trying new things. And the last thing, this is particularly true for us at Pinterest, but I think it's true for all of us because we're creatives. The most important thing, I think, in terms of keeping your designers engaged is making sure that you have an inspired team. If your designers are inspired, whether it's by each other, the projects that they're working on, the environment they're in, they're more likely to create an inspiring and creative product.
Hey, everyone. My name is Soleio. I was at Facebook from 2005 to 2011. I was Facebook's 2nd product designer. While there, I got to work on a bunch of core products, building out a lot of our early features for our users and overseeing our visual design standards and overseeing a lot of our growth. The reason why I'm here is, along with building products with my colleagues there, I was responsible for helping to bring and attract a lot of our talent to the design organization as we went through hypergrowth. After Facebook, I joined Dropbox, where I led design from 2012 to 2014. Where we oversaw the growth of the design team from about 3 people all the way through to, I think today we have about 40-some designers in the organization. I wanted to come here to talk to you guys about understanding core motivation. I think that at the end of the day, any organization, its real competitive edge is aligning people to what the business is setting out to do. And within the design discipline, it's understanding a person's core motivation for being a designer. What gets them up in the morning? What is their dream work? What is their dream gig? Who are the people that they want to be affiliated with? What's the kind of work that they want to be affiliated with? Whether it be craftsmanship, whether it be illustration, whether it be visual storytelling, it's really important for you to be able to concretely identify what a person wants to do as a designer, what brought them into the field. And the thing that actually worked for us a great deal at Dropbox was asking that question, having that conversation, understanding what led you to become a designer. What is it that you take pride in your work? What's the sort of thing that you'll do that you don't have to be paid for? And what are clever ways, from an interviewer standpoint, to solicit that? We found it just by asking the question, like, show us some side projects that you've worked on. What are the things that you've done that you haven't been paid for? What's your proudest design collaboration? You can learn a lot of things about whether or not a person is not just a great technical fit for your organization, but also a great culture fit. One of the things that we did at Dropbox was articulate a set of values around how we want to conduct ourselves as people, as a business, and make sure that those values are described as hiring attributes that we embed in our hiring standards. Making sure that every single person that we're hiring into Dropbox exhibits the qualities of being humble, being audacious, people who are really passionate about certain details, and people who are going to be really trustworthy, because it follows that you're not going to build software that's going to help people collaborate. You're not going to build software that's going to that people are going to really trust unless you hire folks who themselves are worthy of trust.
Hey, my name's Daniel, and I'm a design partner at Google Ventures. So Google Ventures is Google's venture capital arm. We invest in about 250 companies, and that means that I, as a designer, get to work with those 250 companies to help them to be more successful. Previously, I helped run a couple of startups and founded two startups. So I have a lot of experience in the startup world. Now it's really interesting to be on the other side of the fence and to get to work with a wide variety of startups, everything from life sciences to consumer internet. And one of the things that they often come to us with is like, oh, hey, we heard design is like this pixie dust, or we know that we suck at design and we want to hire a designer. And design's like a really big term. And so we often help them to either look at their design needs either as filling the gaps, filling the holes in their business, or looking at where the biggest opportunities are in their business. And even a small startup that doesn't have a designer, somebody who wears fancy clothes and a cardigan, somebody's doing the design at that business. And so what we'll frequently do is talk to them about the different design skills. And we'll say, we'll talk about visual design, front-end development, copywriting, product interaction, and research. If you really really roughly cut up design, you might be able to do it that way. And then you look at their business and say, well, where are you guys the strongest? And maybe they have somebody who's doing some copywriting or doing some research. But if you look at it, an engineering-heavy team might have great UI development already, but they're weak on the visual interaction standpoints. And that helps them focus in on, instead of trying to post a job listing for a unicorn-type designer and go really broad across everywhere, it helps them really focus in and hone their pitch, hone who they're looking for, and find the person who's really going to help them out the most.
Cool. So my name's Shalin. I'm the creative director at Uber. And I kind of want to start off with, I guess, intro to myself. So I started off at an agency called Hot Studio back in, I don't really remember the year, probably like 6 years ago. And I worked out of their New York or San Francisco office, went to New York to help them establish a presence in New York. And then shortly after, I left to work on my own startup. In consulting, you tend to go pretty wide. You go understand different verticals, such as like automotive and healthcare and science. But you never really see a product from beginning to end. And so I was at a point where I decided I want to see what it takes to build a product from beginning to end, and decided to build my own startup. And so that process and journey led me to doing a round of funding, essentially, and was approached by Designer Fund, where I pitched and met a couple of mentors, and got in touch with Travis at Uber. And so that was the start of my journey at Uber and how I kind of got there. So I kind of wanted to touch on like growth at Uber. We're about 4.5 years old, and growth has been pretty incredible for us. And so wanted to just throw out some numbers around like how fast we've grown over the last 2.5 years. Since March 2012 to today, September 2014. It's quite staggering, growing a team from 1 to X, in just a short period of time. And I'm hoping to kind of cover some of the hiring practices, challenges, and failures that we've gone through. So the 3 things that we typically look for at Uber when we're hiring, and then how we measure success, basically around the work is, we define it as with speed, vision, and quality. All 3 are essentially required. It's not like you have to be amazing at quality and speed but not have vision, right? And during our evaluation process, we also fine-tune and calibrate for speed, vision, and quality. This is essentially how what we look for in candidates when we're looking at portfolios, right? And then the first part is about how they did the work, and then, about the work itself, and then how they did the work, right? So that involves, what does the process look like? Do they work well with ambiguity, constraints? Do they have an ego? Do they work hard? And then overall communication, personal and interpersonal communication. So, yeah.
Thanks. As you guys are talking, you've all sort of touched on this, but I'm curious if there is one greatest challenge for you in the hiring process.
Sourcing.
Sourcing?
Yeah. It's basically identifying talent.
Yeah.
Sort of, if you take this statement, break it into 2 chunks, how do you identify people out there in the universe that are great designers or can be great designers? And then 2, how do you bring them to your organization?
So what do you do?
Hey, if any of you guys are looking for a job, come talk to us.
So that's what you do?
That's one way.
You get up on stage and you make a pitch? No, where do you find talent, though?
I think there's a variety of places. I think, at Uber specifically, we didn't really have recruiters at the very beginning. So we were leaning on the networks that we had amongst friends and other people that we had worked with in the past. And now, luckily, we have a couple of recruiters that will go out and scan the world for Dribbble and LinkedIn and so on and so forth, all the natural sources. But most of the success that we've had has come through our networks of designers that we've hired. And really, when somebody's able to step up to the plate and be like, I have a friend who's really great at X, Y, and Z, we typically don't hesitate to kind of reach out and contact them. But most of our talent comes from in-house.
Actually, I think one of the larger challenges is getting the timing right. So not just having this source list of designers or a pool of designers that you want to talk to, but the timing. So engaging with them at the right time, because most designers out there have great jobs. And so knowing how to build a relationship with them over a period of time and knowing when the timing is right. Yeah.
How do you do that at Pinterest?
A lot of it is the team. So networks, I think, are the strongest way to bridge the gap between these 2 different problem sets. So finding people that you want to work with, but also getting them in and working with them. So having the designers actually engage in the community, be out there, build relationships with designers, bring them over, have lunch with them, whatever it is, depending on that designer. But knowing that it may be a longer game than a couple of weeks or a month. Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. I feel like it's easier said than done in a lot of ways. I've been on both sides of it, where there's candidates I'm interested in, and then I need to remember to stay in touch with them and keep them on the long-term radar, even if they're not available right now. And in turn, I've also experienced that. People keep up those sorts of relationships with me. And I think as a design manager, we have a lot of other responsibilities. And so I think it's interesting how you could balance that. Like, do you work with recruiters at your companies? Do you manage your relationships all yourselves? Do you try to put some of this onto your team and get them engaged and active? What do you do?
I think the key piece is to build a culture around recruiting. What's enjoyable about this line of work in particular is how collaborative it is. And in order for you to build a healthy design culture and design organizations, that you need to be really proactive about the people that populate it. And so at least at Dropbox and certainly at Facebook, a tremendous amount of our hiring came just from referrals and from people not just referring their buddies or people they've worked with in the past, but naming their heroes, naming the people out there that are producing really great work, and not being shy about cold calling these folks and saying like, hey, we want to have a conversation with you. We want to invite you to work with us on this project. At Dropbox, we found a tremendous amount of success through on-site contracting, bringing people in for 2 to 3 month stints, giving them a desk, giving them a laptop, basically fully integrating them into the team, and then later using that as a means of starting the conversation around like full-time employment. And again, if you sort of like make that list of people who you're really passionate about, but more importantly, you feel deep down are correctly aligned with what you're trying to accomplish as a business, that can get you much further along than just kind of wishing them to join you.
I think that's an interesting strategy, actually, not something that we do a lot at Google, but I've wondered about in the past, bringing people on for a shorter period and getting them active on the team early. Have any of you guys tried that at your companies?
The try it before you buy it kind of concept.
Yeah, and also, like, how do candidates feel in that position?
Yeah, we've done that with a couple of candidates, and we found typically that helps for them to understand the culture, the pace of work that, at which we produce stuff. And it's very different at a Dropbox or Pinterest versus Uber. So just as much as they're evaluating us, we're evaluating them as well. And so I think it's a fair ask to kind of do that. And it's nice. It's easy to have those conversations at the end of the 3 months or doing those check-ins every month and being like, hey, how are you feeling? Are you feeling supported? Like, are things working for you? Are you finding success in your project? Do you like working with engineers or PMs? So you get to answer all that and just kind of not having as much risk, which is kind of nice. But generally, we find people that jump on right after the 3-month period. So.
Yeah. A few years ago, I was looking for, considering my options, and I went and talked to one of the big kids in the Bay Area, and the CEO said to my face, he said, listen, you're not getting married to us. Come and try it for 3 months. I was like, that was a baller thing to say. I mean, it was not what I expected. I thought he was like, join our team. You're going to be happy here for the rest of your life. And I was very tempted to actually try it. So it's a unique pitch.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's a good way to scale needs for the organization, especially if you're going through a growth stage and you know that there's just a laundry list of things you wish you were working on. That can align really well with some terrific freelancers that are out there. It gives you an opportunity to just introduce some diversity of thought and process into your team, even if it doesn't net out to a full-time hire. We've just found a tremendous amount of success, both in terms of staffing projects, getting like awesome experiences out the door, and then ultimately converting them to full-time hires. When we had our first developer conference in this building, we basically contracted this tremendous illustrator, Ryan Putnam, who ultimately joined the team by virtue of like his exposure to Dropbox through the lens of that project. We were able to get the project done, and more importantly, we were able to achieve like a great full-time hire.
So I wonder how this plays into the next topic I wanted to talk about a little bit, senior designers versus junior designers. It feels like maybe with the exception of you, Daniel, being offered 3-month gig, you're not getting married to this company. It seems great for junior designers or new designers getting started. They want to just try out a few options or not commit to anything. But also, how do you source for really senior talent? I found this to be particularly challenging myself. I have a lot of senior designer friends, but they're very happy in their jobs. What do you do?
You never say no.
OK.
I think there's a certain amount of relentlessness that comes with it. I think going back to what I was saying earlier about understanding core motivation, you need to everybody here in this room has a career trajectory, right? Everybody sort of has a thesis in their head of what they can accomplish in their professional careers, like why they entered design in the first place, and how that's going to play out over time. I think a key part of it is like understanding what the trajectory looks like, figuring out, does it align with my business, with my team? Is there a great fit here? And then painting that picture. This is concept inception, right? That was popularized with this movie, but I actually think that it directly applies to recruiting. You have to sort of create a scenario where a person clearly understands their role in the team, how it aligns with their individual story, and how they can achieve growth in your organization. But most important of all, you have to be able to actually realize that growth. You need to be able to make that promise and deliver on it. Because I think designers, creatives can smell bullshit. And so I think it's really important for you to be able to actually demonstrate how a person can grow and achieve that thesis, achieve that storyline in your organization.
I think part of it is, again, it's the long game. You have to be willing to wait for the right timing. So if you know that that junior designer wants to be a part of the team, you probably have a lot more opportunities for them to engage on a project. But senior designers, they do have a story. They've been somewhere. There's certain things that they're looking to work on next. And so sometimes it's just about having that business opportunity in your project and getting them aligned on that. And which means that more often than not, you have to have a very specific pitch for that senior designer, which is, hey, you're going to be working on this with these people, and this is the impact that we foresee you having on the company and the product.
And frankly, to source senior talent, there's nothing wrong with going and approaching the people you love, whether or not they have a current job. And you don't have to poach them by carrying around 2 big bags of cash, putting on their table. But talk to them about the role that you're looking to fill, and then ask them who they'd hire for the position. Because either they're going to step up and say, you know what, to tell you the truth, I'm not very happy where I am right now, and that sounds cool. Yeah, I'm interested.
Yeah.
Or even if they're not interested, ask them who are the 3 people they'd hire for that position. Go start the conversation with those people. It's a great way to kind of work your way out. And for hiring senior talent, it's just hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard, and if you're not putting in the legwork, you're not going to get good people.
I would piggyback on that. Like, designers collect designers, and they would more often than not just like tell you who are the great folks they should be talking to. Curiously enough, we hired Evan Sharp to Facebook by virtue of a referral like that. We had actually reached out to somebody in New York, and they were like, I'm not interested in a role there, but you should talk to this guy, Evan Sharp. And lo and behold, like, he ended up making a great hire and ultimately a great founder. But that 1 degree away is just free information. And if you're not getting that free information with every single recruiting conversation that you're having, you're just throwing away like valuable intel. So,
yeah.
So you got.
So I'll just jump in real quick. So, and part of the thing that Mia talked about around building a story and listening, I think it's really important for senior level talent to really listen and figure out what was their story before they joined the last company, what are they getting out of it, what's missing, and then trying to format a sales pitch or the story that aligns around your culture, your goals, and seeing how they could potentially fit in, like painting a better picture for them, essentially. And I think what designers really want is to solve really hard problems. And I think as long as you make it about problems and not about money, I think you're going to have a lot of success, right? But it's really actively listening to where they are, where they want to go, how will Uber or some other company format that story for them, and really pitching it that way. We found success. So.
You guys touched on this for a brief moment. Poaching and hiring ethics. And I think this is tricky. Designers do collect designers. And when you leave, you want to bring the best people you know with you. But I think there is a fine line. How do you know, when to lay off, when to be more gentle about who you go after? You also want to build a great team. Do you have examples of either you've tried this and it's been successful, you've tried this and you actually got slapped on the hand, or there was a incident?
You call it poaching, I call it recruiting. I mean, great designers have great jobs. It's a really great time for all of us right now to work on a lot of awesome stuff. And so, yes, there are legal things that you should definitely avoid in terms of recruiting designers. But hey, if they're excited about your product and your team and you're excited about them, there's no harm in having a conversation.
Okay.
I'm not going to do anything underhanded if I'm trying to hire somebody. I'm expecting that if I went and chatted with them about the job, if they're going to go tell their boss potentially, hey, Burka's trying to get me to come do something, So, if I'm poaching people from Twitter, I don't want Mike Davidson, he knows where I live. He can mess with me. But
hey, Mike.
There's nothing wrong with having a conversation with somebody and just talking about how interesting something is. And I talk to Googlers and chat to them about their current job. I'm not going to go poaching people from Google, but if they're looking to, looking for their next thing, it's a great opportunity.
Yep. So moving on to, after sourcing is clearly a challenge, and I think we all agree that there's not one clear solution or that's going to make this really easy for us. But we still do a pretty good job. Your teams are pretty well developed. What do you look for when designers come onto your teams? So in the first week or the first month, do you have a process for welcoming them, onboarding them, getting them involved with the rest of the team that's been successful or unsuccessful?
For us at Pinterest, we do a couple different things, and we've tried things over, the past months, years. Sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not. We try and have a culture buddy, and we don't call it a culture buddy, but basically another designer on the team that's there to look out for them, take them to really important sessions, meeting, cultural moments they may not know about yet, but also be there to answer questions, because sometimes going to a leader on their team, their manager, it might be a little bit intimidating at the beginning. Things that we start to look for early on is if they're not asking really tough questions in the first couple weeks, I'm not sure they're paying attention. So I'm actually really excited that designers are asking tough questions. How does this work? That seems weird. What's going on here? It means they're observing, they're digging in, they're meeting the right people. And part of that is setting them up for success and giving guidance on, hey, you should go talk to these people, you should get engaged in these certain programs or projects, and just kind of absorb. And so the questions that come out of that are really important. The other thing that we try and do is get them on project as fast as possible so that they're engaged engaged in the work. That doesn't mean we expect them to ship something on day 2, although that's great. We want them to be involved in the project and know who their teammates are. That's really important for them to absorb.
I think the highest order bit is to always actively invest in it. Even if you're really starved for resources, and it'd be really hard to carve out 10 to 20% of a person's time to onboard a new designer, it's such a crucial investment. One, you need to be able to just assimilate them into the culture, expose them to the problems that are being worked on, introduce them to teams, real hard work, get a sense of whether or not the person's going to be the sort of fit that you had anticipated, because you had probably spent N hours evaluating them over the course of interviews, but that's going to pale in comparison to the first week of work that they conduct. And so I think it's really important to align them with a buddy. At Dropbox, we called it your DFF, your design friend forever. And you have a DFF assigned ahead of time. That person would be responsible not just for conducting all of the social one-on-ones and taking you around the building, but they're also going to be responsible for vetting projects, introducing you to the stakeholders for those projects, and making sure you're getting your work done within your first couple weeks. I think that the onboarding process varies according to the life stage of a particular company. When Dropbox was a lot smaller, we sort of did the round, robin, give me the projects that are unstaffed, and we'll find the ones that are scoped well enough for you, and we'll try to parcel it up into a 6-week program or residency for that new designer. As Dropbox has scaled, we've been much more proactive about aligning designers to particular design clusters so that they basically get integrated into the team that we anticipate them landing in, and more importantly, getting a sense of how their technical fit is incorporated into that particular design cluster.
Similarly interested in the senior versus junior position here, because on the team that I was just left, a pretty senior designer joined, and he really didn't get assigned a mentor or a buddy, because he was very senior, and he specifically came in to help run the team. And he came to me and asked for advice, and I gave him advice. It was no problem. And then he continually came to me, and I started becoming his de facto mentor, which I was perfectly happy to do, but he was much senior to me. And I realized that either he was kind of lost in the cracks, or we just we weren't paying as much attention to him because he was so senior. But I think the kind of guidance he needed was maybe more organizational, less around craft and UX and feedback on specific work. But even still, we needed to pay attention to getting senior designers up to speed and active and engaged too. And I'm curious what you guys have tried. Shaolin, have you tried stuff with senior designers that are different from junior, more younger?
For us, it's a little different, right? So, by that chart, we just have a lot of priorities in kind of building a design discipline. When I started at Uber, it was literally there was no onboarding, right? It was just hey, I need a computer. There's an Apple store across the street, go get it and expense it, right? I need some Post-it notes. Well, there's an Office Depot, go get it. And at a very early stage, I think it's okay. But as we start to develop into a more mature company, I think these onboarding processes or boot camps are super useful. We're getting better about our onboarding process, but I don't think we're there yet. I think we have a pool of talented designers that new hires can rely on. We now have these programs in which there are multiple designers on a single team. So when we put a designer on that team, the program is essentially expected to onboard and ramp them up. And we're not necessarily looking for somebody to produce anything in a couple of days, but more often than not, we found people just being put me in the game, coach. I want to build something. I want to do something, right? So as long as they have that passion, and we're not going to let that get in the way. But in all honesty, I think we can be better about onboarding, but we're not there yet.
So I'm wondering also about happiness and spirit and culture of the team in general. Have you guys tried anything experimental or crazy to keep your teams happy, outside of work, off-site, things like that? Interesting activities?
For us at Pinterest, we do a lot of cultural events, whether it's really small stuff or design team offsites. In general, we're a very makerly culture, and the team is very passionate about their different interest areas beyond design. For instance, we started this small thing that is not just for designers, but the larger company called Studio Nights. We have a design studio that's dedicated to the creative team. But we wanted to open that up to the larger company. And so we basically had one individual teach a small class, one of their skills or interest areas, to other people at the company. It was a great way for a rapidly scaling startup to get to know each other, to make things, to have fun, have a beer. So we did everything from beekeeping to GitHub 101 to bookbinding, all kinds of stuff. And so that was a really great way to get people engaged. As a design team, we also get out a lot because we're rapidly growing, and it's really important for us to not only have social connections, but be on the same path as the design team, understand where we're headed, what we believe in, because there's going to be a lot of new people coming in and different perspectives, which is great. It will stretch and grow our perspectives, but we also want to be in alignment in terms of where we're headed and what we're building.
To be honest, I think that some of these offsite things are kind of BS. It's it feels good, and I know a team that took the whole team and they got on a plane and went to Los Angeles and went to the Eames house, and that sounds fun. I like going places, and that's cool. But I think lots of teams do this stuff where they do team building exercises and they do fun, right? And again, I like fun. Fun's fun. But I think
likes mandatory fun time, though.
Mandatory fun time, yeah, it takes all the fun out of it. It's
exactly.
true. But I think that if you're going to do this stuff, I think there's some value to it. I think it's overrated a bit, but I think there's some value to it. If you're going to do it, do things where it helps you get in the mind space of your users, right? Like Pinterest has obvious places to do that, but I'm trying to think of some good examples. But there's lots of exercises you can do that help you understand your users. But the best team building stuff is doing great projects together, like work projects, things you ship and you succeeded, and then go out and celebrate together. That's another great way to build team unity. But these BS offsite barbecue, let's all do three-legged races and build our teams, off.
I'm gonna.
So I would claps. You have 5 people on your team.
No, I've worked on teams that are bigger than 5. I love my team. If you're here,
so
let's go do three-legged races.
I think my perspective on that is slightly skewed and a little different. So for me, team outside bonding exercises are, you can work on projects and that's great, but you're working with a core of 5 people at a time. You're not getting to interact with the other 40 designers that you have around you. And I think part of it is building a shared experience together, right? So we have a designer at Uber who did last holiday, she did a gingerbread house making contest, right? And everybody was super down on it. It was one of those forced fun kind of things at the very beginning. But by the time we finished it, I think the entire experience was it was not only working with 4 new people on your team, but building in a common goal, right? And at the end of it, it was we were laughing, we were talking about some of the mistakes that we made, some of the cool things that had come out of the gingerbread houses, and I don't know, it was just really things that were not related to work or to users. And I think designers at Uber especially, they think about work all the time, right? So what is that natural thing that we can do beyond drinking, I think is also important. But
one of the things that I would encourage is you think about your offsite as time to make together, and that doesn't have to be just barbecues or roller skating or whatever you do for the mandatory fun stuff. So 2 offsites, for example, that we did. The first one, when the team was really young, meaning it was just a handful of us, part of our offsite was to think about what are the characteristics that we want our design team to be, and what do we want to grow into. So we talked a lot about what environments made us successful, what made us happy, and we basically did our own design exercise around the team that we want to build, which influenced who we hired, the environment that we created as we grew. Another example is, we had an afternoon where we all wanted to work on this one project. It wasn't a priority for the company, and we said, you know what, we're going to go away and we're going to work on it. So we were working, but we were bonding over a project that we wanted to work on, and some really cool stuff came out of that. So I think there's a way to balance that, and maybe this comes from my consulting background. There's a lot of effort that goes into running a workshop, and this is basically a workshop with your team. So as the effort that you put into it is the kind of return that you'll get.
Yeah, I like that, though. You set a base of this is serious fun. You're actually getting something productive out at the end of it. That's
serious
great.
Fun.
But to echo your point, I think the best way to retain talent at the end of the day is to challenge them on things that are going to matter to the business, give them the opportunity to take that winning shot and make sure that they celebrate when they hit it. I think at the end of the day, like doing great work is what keeps people happy, is what keeps people engaged. Everything else is not going to really substitute for that, right? Like all the office perks, offsites, the fun little brunches, that doesn't matter as much as like shipping software that changes people's lives and holding people accountable for that and making sure that they celebrate it when they do it. When they finally get across that milestone, make sure you're throwing the biggest party in town because they need to recognize that at the end of the day, that's why you're at that organization, is to achieve those goals.
Yep. As you're talking, it's making me think that a lot of our effort is spent on keeping our teams happy and engaged and putting the right sort of cultural values into our teams, which will then lead towards finding the right talents, building the teams in the ways that you want. I'm curious, Soleio, you at Dropbox were trying specifically to put the culture directly in the team before looking for talent. And like when you choose where to spend your time, sourcing or team building, how do you decide where to spend most of your time? Where is it going to be most valuable?
I think at the end of the day, it's like trying to set up culture around the things that are going to matter, not just for a particular quarter or a particular year, but over time. Like, what is it that's going to be the differentiator for your business, not just from a recruiting standpoint, but also just from like a competitive standpoint, and make sure that the culture feeds through that. And going back to the hiring attributes that we were talking about, at the end of the day, Dropbox is in the business of storing people's most important information and bringing it to life, right? And so that requires people to be able to sweat the details and really just cultivate a culture around that. But also just to be able to be like trustworthy, be people who are like going to be open, honest, and earnest, and making sure that you're rewarding that day to day, not just in terms of individual actions, but also trying to cultivate programs and acknowledging that, like, okay, for us to be able to sweat the details and build the best quality products, we care about diversity, so we're going to set these specific goals around it. And every time we have that recruiting pipeline meeting, we're going to be measuring how we're tracking towards those goals, and making sure that you're not just like saying that you're paying attention to something or caring about it, but you're actually like showing results against it.
Okay, I'm curious if there's any questions from the audience. Anything that we haven't covered?
All right.
Yes?
Right.
Yay.
Are we the first to have questions?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. I'm curious how you recommend prioritizing diversity when you're looking for designers.
That is an excellent question, first of all.
So we're going to take it away?
All right, so in all honesty, we were talking about this backstage, and we were debating whether we should bring this up, but thank you for bringing that up, actually. I guess we could tee it off. Burka had brought up the conversation around diversity, and he was kind of nervous about just even bringing the conversation up, which led us to some great discussions around like diversity. I think is an important part in the hiring process, right? And it takes rigor and it takes intention, and you have to. It doesn't come easy, right? And so I think in hiring within the entire design discipline or within the organization, you have to make time for it. It means you have to increase your pool of candidates and work harder at finding, a more diverse set of people versus the ones that you're just automatically going to get, through your hiring pipeline. Do you want to share any?
Oh boy, you're really like setting me up here.
Yeah.
Well, I commiserate with anybody who finds this uncomfortable. I mean, it's really difficult to talk about this stuff without feeling like you're marginalizing people, and without talking about it like you're talking about a specific group. And I think one of the good suggestions is to not think of it like, we need more women, and then like, oh, I've got folders full of women. Who's that? Mitt Romney, I think, said that? Binders full of women.
Binders, yeah.
Is to think about it, I think, a bit more broadly, and to think about, diversity generally, like, where are your people from? Are they, do they have a diverse set of background experiences? Do they, they could be, different language experiences, different, there's all kinds of areas of diversity, and then you don't fall into that trap where you feel like you're kind of categorizing everybody and getting yourself in trouble, I guess.
One of the things I mentioned earlier is thinking about the composition of your team, and to the idea of having different profiles. I think you constantly need to be assessing, hey, what are different qualities and aspects and backgrounds that are going to make our design team better? Without singling out a specific gender or race, it's about what is going to help us grow as a team. And that may include gender and race, depending on your team. But go beyond that and constantly be looking beyond your assumptions of what's right for the team. And And that means that you may have to take some risks. That means that you may have to hire people that you wouldn't normally hire. And that leads me to the next point, which is it's not enough just to hit your numbers and say, great, we set a goal, we are now more diverse, but actually to follow through and make sure that those people are engaged and getting into the work and getting into the team, because that's where it really matters. Are you hiring them, or are they staying engaged? And do they actually make the team better?
And a good way to start the conversation within a design organization is just to wind the clock back. One thing that's amazing about this space is that people's backgrounds in design today are so diverse. I mean, it's not like we all went to design school, right? Folks are coming from different backgrounds, like different motivation centers, and you ask yourself, well, how would I have identified, myself out of like the sea of people out there in the world 5 years ago? Because there are more people like that out there. And in order for us to kind of like grow this industry and grow the design discipline, we need to look outside of the known quantities, the people that are already in tech organizations for talent. We're going to have to start to look much further beyond just Silicon Valley, but thinking about who are the international candidates that we should be hiring. What are the emergent schools that we should be hiring from? Are they architecture schools? Are they like schools that aren't even teaching design? Maybe it's computer science. And I think that's going to have to be the competitive advantage that any hiring manager cultivates within their team is like, again, having an open conversation around like, okay, how many of you guys went to design school? Raise your hands. A lot, but not everyone. And I think that's worth noting when it comes to sourcing and to cultivating talent and shining a really bright beacon towards this line of work. I think at the end of the day, the chief responsibility that every person in this room has is indicating that there is tremendous careers in design and tech. Two, that it's just a very fulfilling work. But then more importantly, that this is something you can actually get paid to do. And I don't think that as a community we're doing enough to communicate that message to people early enough in their careers. Like every 18-year-old should know that they can actually be a software designer. They can actually pursue this as a career path.
We probably have time for one more question. I see a few.
That guy.
This guy.
Wow, that's loud. Hi.
Hi.
So you guys talked a little bit about hiring junior people versus senior people, and I know that one thing I hear all the time from people who are hiring is it's so hard to hire people, it's so hard to find people and source people. But I also know that there's a lot of people who are sort of fresh out of school who are like, it's impossible to find a job, I can't find anyone who will hire me. So there seems to be a disconnect between like organizations' ability to hire junior people. So I wondered if each of you could talk about, in organizations you've been a part of, what's the #1 roadblock to hiring junior people into more roles?
We were talking about this earlier. I think one of the things that we found, because this is a discipline that is evolving, there's a lot of terms being thrown around. Are you a UX designer, product designer, whatever? I know that must be really confusing for people right out of school to figure out how to position themselves. So there are definitely a bunch of awesome startups and resources for those designers to get involved in, like Designer Fund. But one of the things that we do on our team is make sure that we give feedback to every single candidate. Hey, this is what we saw in your portfolio. We actually think your strength is this. And there's an opportunity for you to grow in these other areas and help them shape their narrative. And even though that might not be a match for us right now, hopefully we're giving them something to propel them forward to the next opportunity, whether it's at Pinterest or somewhere else. So I think there's work to be done on both sides.
I think the leading obstacle is the perception that it's, I think a lot of folks take so much pride in doing the work that they don't recognize like how leveraged it is to set aside 20% of your time to helping nurture and grow others. And every design manager should be thinking about instilling a culture of growth, not just in terms of sheer headcount, but in terms of growing your people, accelerating their career paths within your building, within your team, and making sure that you're thinking about that as the most leveraged opportunity, because what you'll find that comes from it is that mentorship is a natural part of growth, right? And if you can create a culture of mentorship within your team, you're going to be able to have the infrastructure in place to absorb a lot more talent and to take calculated gambles on people who are just going to be coming out of school saying, I don't really have much experience, my portfolio is this, I'm eager to learn, I'm going to work my ass off, but would you please hire me? And I think that's the leading obstacle that I've seen across not just like the brand name tech companies, but across all of tech, is that we can't make enough calculated gambles because there isn't a culture of mentorship, and that it really starts with design managers emphasizing like growth within their organizations.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's a ratio between mentors and mentees, and junior designers, by definition, need mentorship. I think the advice I always give junior designers when I have coffee with them is find one person who you can see as a mentor and try to work with them. I mean, you don't have to work with a big team. You know, it doesn't really matter. It's like being able to sit next to somebody who can mentor you is like easily the best way to learn. And one way I think that especially smaller teams can potentially take a risk on junior designers, because that's really what it is you're an unproven quantity, is potentially look outside of your business for potential mentors. Bring in somebody as an advisor to your business who's a senior designer, who's willing to put aside 2 hours a week to come and work with your junior designer. That way you can take the risk, but still have somebody who's able to cultivate that young designer and bring them along. That's something we try to do as the GV team a little bit. You know, if our startups hire a junior designer, then we'll spend a bit of time, you know, working with them all the time and giving them that critical critique and feedback. But I don't think that's just limited to that situation. I think you can, especially in San Francisco, there's such a wealth of senior designers to leverage that type of mentorship.
Yep.
And if you're a senior designer, I'm sure you learn by learning from mentors, like critique them, be honest with them. And help bring them along, because that's, I think, is our responsibility as senior designers.
It's so much more effective than writing blog posts. I think a lot of it just involves just like identifying folks out there who really want to do great work and spending the time with them. I think every person in this room can think back on great teachers, and I often believe that designers in tech underestimate their potential as teachers for others.
Yeah.
I love that. We are out of time, but I think that's a great way to wrap up the panel. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, everyone.